What I've Done. Written by Night Breeze. Read by No One and Nobody. Chapter 25. Princess Luna cantered through the broken door of the lab, well aware of the death that preceded its destruction. The body count had just come in, and with the destruction of the vicinity of 4th and Starlight Lane, the alien monster had succeeded in killing 20 people and injuring 50 before he was stopped. All around her, ponies were busy, either repairing the damages caused by the two aliens, either accidentally in Alex's case, or maliciously in the monster's, or examining the object that had formed in the center of the room during the human's episode. Princess Luna eyed the golem, her gaze calculating. Currently this Amelia seemed dead to the world. Its once glowing eyes were nothing but blank sockets, and the orbs of light that served as its joints had disappeared, leaving the limbs strewn about the place. The thing seemed quite dead, though with golems, that was always a suspect assumption.
"Is it malfunctioning?"
Princess Luna asked, causing all the ponies nearby to jump in alarm.
"Princess Luna, I'm so sorry. I didn't see you there,"
Dr. Burner said with a sweeping bow, which was quickly imitated by the rest of the ponies in the room, once they realized that royalty was among them.
"Do not trouble yourselves with formalities at this moment. We have far too many things to worry about for such trivial nonsense,"
the princess said with a wave of her hoof. Grudgingly, the assembled ponies rose from their various bows and got back to work, with the exception of Dr. Burner.
"Now tell me, what have you discovered about our newest friend?"
"Quite a lot, Your Highness. This golem is both the most primitive and advanced piece of living machinery I have ever seen,"
Dr. Burner said as he levitated his clipboard over to the princess.
"How so?"
she asked as she studied the notes with interest.
"The body was created using an artist's matrix,"
he said simply. Princess Luna looked up at the skeleton again, her gaze searching carefully over every inch of the creature's form. Slowly, small details she had missed the first time began to reveal themselves. A series of numbers here, an odd cogwheel there, a weird crack where there shouldn't have been. Not only was it obvious that an artist's matrix was used, but really, given the human's background, it made sense that he'd used one. An artist's matrix was the most primitive method for golem creation. It involved carving or scribbling a basic description of whatever you wanted to make and channeling your power into the drawing. The ritual had the benefits of quickly making golems, but the drawbacks far outstripped those benefits. To start off, the process grabbed anything and everything in the immediate vicinity to construct the golem, prioritizing whatever objects were closest first, and objects of lesser mass second. This resulted in some rather interesting golems. Once, Luna had seen one made entirely of leaves, not even remotely threatening. The second problem was power. Not only did this process require a huge pool of mana to begin with, but without a power matrix to siphon magic from Equus's field, the golem would only have as much power as its creator could channel into it at the time of construction. This meant that golems created in this manner could last anywhere between a couple of seconds to a full minute, making them good for distractions, but little else. To put it bluntly, it was a method of golem construction that was so far out of date that only ponies with doctorates in golemancy even knew what it was, which was why Luna found it surprising that Dr. Burner would have called it advanced.
"What do you mean, it's advanced?"
she asked him as she moved closer.
"When I speak of advanced, I, of course, am referring to these rather interesting plates located in the chest region. We've run a few initial scans, and the degree of complexity they have far outstrips anything I have ever seen."
The pony carefully picked up a probe and a magnifying glass, while motioning the lunar princess closer. He then held the magnifying glass over the plate for her, and pointed out one of the small, silvery studs found there.
"You see these? These are tiny, tiny golems. Each are only capable of doing two things, turning on and off, and telling this wire here,"
he pointed at the adjoining tiny wire,
"what its current state is. Alone, this little guy could do just about nothing."
"Just about?"
"Correct. but it doesn't need to do a whole lot.
Dr. Burner said as he adjusted his glasses.
Think for a second about the tiny ant. A single ant cannot do much alone. It can bite, it can pick up stuff, but a single ant is hardly capable of creating an entire anthill, or eating away at a house. It is by working together, and by breaking these tasks down into smaller, easier-to-manage chunks, that a colony prevails.
So, you are saying that this isn't so much a single golem as a colony of golems working together?
Luna asked, somewhat stunned.
Correct. Now, if you recall, my princess, we have tried methods like this in the past.
Burner said, excitement dripping from his voice as he eagerly bounced up and down on the tips of his hooves.
Our problems were that we always thought that the golem needed some kind of central regulator, a sort of queen golem, to ensure that each golem knew what they were doing. We were both wrong and right.
How can you be both wrong and right?
Luna said, not taking her eyes off the complex view through the magnifying glass.
Do you see that large squarish block near the center?
The excitable doctor asked, pointing it out with the probe.
Large, of course. It is comparable at this point. The block is still smaller than it has a right to be,
Luna answered dryly.
True, which is why it's so impressive that it's made up of billions of golems.
Did I hear you correctly?
Apparently, our main problem wasn't that we needed larger golems, but smaller ones,
the pony said, sounding as if he didn't quite believe what was coming out of his own mouth.
The key, it appears, is to break the instructions for the golems up into such tiny bits that these billions of golems have no problem understanding and enacting those instructions. I'm thinking of calling this whole process data smashing.
This seems quite complex. Something that I'm certain our friend couldn't have possibly had time to do. The data smashing of the instructions alone would have taken days, if not years, to complete,
Luna said as she took a step back.
Again, you are correct. The instructions part we still can't quite understand, but rest assured, he had a little help with that,
Dr. Burner said, gesturing towards a nearby table where 5 nondescript arcanite rods sat. Each were probably about the size of a normal unicorn horn, though clearly more rectangular than conical. Each also had several strange characters carved into them, which Luna instantly recognized as the human's native tongue. Curiously, Luna reached out and picked up one of the rods for inspection.
And what are these, then?
Those are where our friend embedded his fallen comrade's soul shards,
Burner said simply, causing the princess to put the rod down respectfully.
We still don't understand everything involved, but the machine and those soul shards work in unison. The shards create instructions, the machine breaks them down, works them over, and enacts them. Then the machine returns feedback to the soul. It is similar to how a brain and nervous system work in tandem with a living soul, though not nearly as efficient.
Luna stared at the rods in stunned silence, each one glittering in the light that the sun cast through the window, almost as if they didn't contain the shattered remains of 5 proud souls.
Where is Robert?
Luna asked, suddenly snapping out of her trance.
I must ask him, someone, about these.
A voice said behind the princess. Luna turned her head to see where the sound came from, only to feel her heart fall at the sight. Behind her was Bunsen Burner's brother, Labbeaker. Hovering in the air in front of him was the broken molten remains of the metallic cat that Alex had repurposed.
What happened to it?
Ah, there it is. Slam it on the table, Beaker. I need to show Her Highness something,
Dr. Burner said, brightening up a bit. His brother did as instructed, causing the table to shudder a little under the chunk of metal's weight. At first, Luna was confused by the rough treatment, but the sound that it made immediately let her know why Burner had instructed his brother to act as he did.
It's been hollowed out,
the princess said, her interest picking up.
Indeed it has, Your Highness. We believe that many of the parts, these plates in particular, were once inside the cat. Once we came to that hypothesis, we ran a number of scans on the storage rods and found that this one,
Burner said, hefting one of the rods on the table,
is a perfect match to the magical signature we got when we ran the same scan on Robert.
The princess nodded at this, somewhat relieved that Robert had survived the encounter with the invading monsters.
So, what do you think we can do, knowing all of this? Do you think we can replicate Alex's feat?
Oh, heavens, no,
Bunsen Burner said with a sigh.
I've only just begun to understand the basic concept. The level of fine control needed to assemble a golem of this caliber? I'd have to be in an eon in order to even know where to get started. However, this design has given me some ideas.
How so?
This tech is very clearly designed to be modular. Not only that, but an examination of the cat has revealed that none of the outlier Arcanite nodes controlling the limbs were tampered with. Much.
The last part the princess barely heard, as Burner had said it under his breath. Before she was able to call him out on it, though, he plowed on through with his thought.
I believe that these plates could substitute for a more traditional Arcanite core in any of our Golem designs, with one of the 6 storage rods serving as the Golem's instructions. Our cores before were incapable of handling the information required to run an omniscope, but with these beauties...
At this point, Bunsen Burner gave a short, somewhat disturbing giggle.
They'd probably be able to take the load easily.
Princess Luna nodded in agreement. At the very least, they would have something to work on with other than the backup plan. Maybe we'll be able... She started to think, but stopped when something that Burner had said earlier suddenly clicked.
Wait, 6 storage rods? I only see 5 here.
Ah, you're forgetting the one in the Golem here,
Bunsen Burner said, pointing towards a small Arcanite rod that was attached to one of the skeleton's metal plates.
Of course, my apologies,
the Lunar Princess said with a nod of her head.
At any rate, continue with your research and see if you can either build or pull from storage a body more suitable than this first attempt by our friend. As impressive as it is, I believe that he will be quite grateful if he can get one of his friends into a body that is unlikely to spontaneously shut down.
Right away, Your Highness.
With that taken care of, Princess Luna turned and left, a burning ember of hope resting in her chest. The White Queen motioned for the priestess to take a seat. She hadn't invited Akitesh to her castle. Rather, she had instructed her subjects to put together a pavilion on the tarmac. It was a very clear message, one that said, "You are not my friend, but my enemy." But at the very least, she was willing to parley for a time.
So, as I was saying, we want nothing more than peace,
Akitesh said as she sat down on the odd short stool, her claws folded on her lap while her tail wrapped around the stool legs.
But others are not as pure in their intentions as us.
The equine cocked her head to the side at this, but otherwise did not say anything.
To answer your earlier question, we do not care where he goes or what he does. All we care about is that he is healed, both in mind and body, and that his tormentors are brought to justice,
Akitesh said, trying to put the White Queen's worries to rest.
To this end, I wish to talk to him, to hear his side of the story, and to collect his testimony. Why talking is bringing bug with?
The equine asked, her piercing purple eyes burrowing into the Cusin.
As is our tradition and law, any trespass must be apologized for,
Akitesh said, her eyes not moving from the Queen's.
Since none of the actual perpetrators are here, he is here to apologize on behalf of his race, both to the victim and to you.
The White Queen didn't say anything. In fact, she barely had a change in her expression, with only the tiniest of eyebrow raises to show that she had even heard.
I, understand that no apology could be worth the lives lost or the pain endured, yet we must still...
Fine, the White Queen said suddenly, catching Akitesh off guard as she rose to her hooves.
Huh?
I is saying fine. Want talk? Good. Want apologize? Good. Want no war? Good, the Queen said, tossing her head back a bit. She then locked the priestess with a stare that could have put even Alagria, Akitesh's mother, to shame. But then leave. Not want Bug here. Not want you here. Ally of Bug. Because of Bugs, lost many homes, lost many lives. You leave, not come back. Akitesh said hesitantly.
That may not be the best idea.
The White Queen let loose another one of those withering stares, causing the priestess to unconsciously gulp again.
You see, now that the traitor is dead, we cannot question him about his motives or allies. They will send more. Maybe not today, or tomorrow, or next week, but they will be coming.
The White Queen continued to stare at her, her gaze never faltering.
We only wish to prevent further loss of life,
Akitesh said, bowing her head respectfully.
To that end, we must stay, for what can your people do to prevent an alien invasion?
Akdesh wasn't sure, but for the briefest of moments, she was certain that she had seen the White Queen smile. However, as quickly as it had come, it was gone.
Come, must apology. Bring ally, apology in person.
The first thing I became aware of was how warm I was. It hadn't reached uncomfortable levels yet, but I was at the point where that could change at any moment. The second thing I noticed was that something close by smelled like a bakery. While this was extremely confusing to me at first, I decided to just roll with it, since the scent was one of my all-time favorites. The third thing that I noticed was that I currently had my arms wrapped around something soft. Now, normally, this probably wouldn't have registered in my head at all, had it not been for the fact that whatever I was hugging was breathing. So, if I were to say, open my eyes right now, what would I see? I asked the room around me. I heard a soft mumble from whatever I was hugging, which immediately caused my eyes to snap open. I was greeted with an unending view of pink, which, if I really thought about it, wasn't the worst thing that I've ever woken up to. It was still quite disconcerting, though, especially since the last thing I remember was having an emotional breakdown in front of Moon. What in the world? I asked, as I tried to disentangle myself from the soft pink pastry-smelling thing. I stopped, however, when my arm jerked against something attached to my wrist. It took me some finagling, but I was finally able to raise my head up enough to get a clear view of what was happening. The arm that I currently had draped over the pink one had some kind of tube sticking out of it, which in turn was hooked up to some kind of glowing machine. It wasn't making any noise, but... Wait a second. Why the heck are you in my bed? I asked the still sleeping pink pony. She just mumbled incoherently, then rolled over and snuggled into my chest. As cute as the pink bundle of randomness was, this was just getting too weird for me. Without any ceremony, I gently disentangled myself from the pink one and reached for the needle in my arm. Before I was able to even touch it, though, a hoof suddenly entered my field of vision, letting me know that someone else was in the room other than me and the pink one. It was one of the nurses, and she was currently shaking her head as if to tell me that pulling the needle was probably a bad idea. Taking my hunch as fact, I stopped trying to get at that darn thing and let myself slump back down into my previous position. This seemed to please the nurse, who held her hoof out in a wait gesture as she moved towards the door. I did as she instructed, watching listlessly as she opened the door and shouted something down the hall. While she was doing that, my mind slowly started to take in the room around me, and I found myself only getting more weirded out as time progressed. There were balloons and streamers everywhere. Confetti was definitely not here the last time I was in this room, and... Was that a 3-tier cake? My mind locked up when I saw the cake, and all I could think about was how I was going to get myself the biggest piece as soon as I could get out of this infernal bed. In fact, I didn't even notice the doctor come in, though I certainly noticed when she pulled the needle from my arm.
Nah! Give a guy some warning, why don't you?
I said as I jerked back a bit. I would have pulled my arm back, but the doctor had been smart enough to envelop my arm with her power, keeping it still while she applied a bandage from where she removed the... Actually, now that I was looking at it properly, I realized that the only resemblance that device had to a needle was that they were both pointy and made of metal. This thing had bands of bright glowing green spaced evenly along its length, and I was pretty sure it wasn't feeding me anything or drawing blood. My point is that this thing was weird. Not only that, but the thing was also responsible for tricking me into roughly waking the pink one, so you can imagine that it had rightfully earned my ire. The pink one didn't look too disturbed at being woken up, though, choosing to take a moment to rub the sleep out of her eyes and say something that I couldn't understand. She immediately perked up, though, when she noticed I was awake. Yeah, I'm glad to see you too, I said awkwardly as she wrapped her hooves around me again. She then bounced out of bed and rushed out of the room without even a glance back, confusing me even further. Okay. Before I could dwell on this anymore, the doctor started making motions for me to get up, all while levitating 2 small cups towards me. Again? She just nodded at me, causing me to grumble a bit as I took the cups and swung myself out of bed. I knew she was just doing her job, but still. As I made my way to the bathroom, I couldn't help but feel strange. I didn't feel bad by any measure of the word, but I felt light. It was hard to describe, kind of like I had a pressure in my skull for longer than I could remember. but only now that it was gone did I notice its presence at all. Honestly, it felt liberating, in a way. After I had finished my business, thanking the high heavens once again that these people had invented real toilet paper, I took a second to look myself in the mirror as I washed my hands. The changes were a lot more pronounced now. The thin beard that had started growing had already fallen out, and so had my eyebrows. It's going to be weird not having those again, but at least I still have my lips, I thought to myself as I took a closer look. The pupils had almost completely expanded to fill my whole eye. If I moved my eye around, I could still see the green, but as for now, it pretty much looked like I had nothing but blackness for eyes. For some strange reason, though, my sight was improving, rather than the opposite, as the mutilated eye let in more light than it was designed to. My teeth were becoming more pointed, but luckily that seemed to be restricted to the front ones. Somewhat curious, I turned to my side, in hopes of seeing what my back was like. I didn't have any spikes yet, at least none that I could see, but was it my imagination or were the bumps on my spine getting larger? Probably, I thought as I looked down at my hands. The alien things still looked quite spindly, but they seemed to be building some muscle and gaining some color. Hopefully that was a good sign of things to come, that I wouldn't lose the majority of my facial features as my genetic code was slowly rewritten. I was so enthralled by the latest changes in my body that I almost didn't notice the knock on the bathroom door. Almost. With a bit of a sniffle, I quickly wiped my eyes clear and made myself presentable. I was keenly aware that that was a pretty pointless task, but I did my best despite my obvious handicap in that area. I'm coming, just hold your... Well, I'm coming anyway. With a deep sigh, I turned and opened the door, not really ready for what the future might be in store for me. But then again, when have I ever been ready for something like that?
If you're enjoying this reading, consider checking out the non-copyright infringement version available on Amazon Prime. See link in video details for more information.